everybody has these moments where, you believe something needs to be, or you believe something about yourself that nobody else either sees or believes. And for a period of time, it might, seem to the outside world that you're crazy, and that this is absolutely insane what you're doing. And then, unless you have that conviction to keep going, you just stop, because there's a lot of pressures on the outside world. And as you and I got a chance to talk at Anthropy, I was like, wow, Alex has this amazing kind of 50 chairs story, not just about a single moment, but really kind of the progression of your life, and just kind of how you got to be to where you are today, which is racing for Lamborghini. Like, how cool is that? So I kind of want to start there, but just quick intro, like what is it? What is it like being a driver for Lamborghini?
Yeah, it's pretty special. It's probably the best job you could think of. But yeah, there's a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes, like we spoke about before. Spoke about this on other stuff. But racing has changed kind of from a purely talent based sport into now a platform to conduct business. It's very expensive. You need a lot of commercial backing behind you. You have to be very good on the business side to make it work. But in terms of the driving, I probably do 330 days a year to drive 35 days a year. So it's really that special that I put that much work. The 85% of my year goes into, or even longer, goes into the business side of it to make the driving side work. But yeah, in general, it's really, really special. It's a thrill like nothing else I've ever experienced in my life. And yeah, I'm still yet to find the same feeling as winning a race in any other walk of life.
Wow, that's amazing, man. So walk me through that moment. So I'm assuming at some point you got a phone call, and they said, Alex, we'd like you to join the team. Like, what was that moment like? What led up to that? Like, where were you prior, and then what was that kind of next step for you?
Yeah, so to give everyone an understanding of my progression through the ranks to get to where I am now, which is a junior driver racing for Lamborghini in Italian GT3. I'm 26 years of age. I started off racing when I was 8 years of age in a kart. Both my mother and father raced in Ireland at an amateur level, and both of them were in the motor trades. It was always car mad growing up. From a very young age, I was trying to see ways that I could get involved. And yeah, on my first ever outing on a kart, I took to water. Did that for 10 years, represented Ireland in Le Mans of karting actually. Won some Irish championships, and gradually just came up through cars, racing in Ireland. And someone told me, look, if you're good enough to win in Ireland, you're good enough to be in the UK probably. And if you can win in the UK, you can move on to Europe, etc., etc. So I ticked all those boxes. Probably biggest achievement was winning the 2022 Motorsport Ireland Young Driver of the Year award, and that was a €50,000 fund from Sport Ireland, which kind of really gave all my partners the great belief that we could really go on to win a global level on the world stage. So since that, I've got on to race with Lamborghini, McLaren, and Aston Martin, racing on 5 different continents, 16 different Formula One tracks, winning 2 championships. And yeah, I suppose to answer your first question, never did I ever get a call about any of these things. I was given one bit of great advice when I was really kind of striving for the next steps in my career, which was the squeaky wheel gets the oil. And the worst thing you can ever do as a professional driver or an aspiring professional driver is to wait for the envelope to come through in the post, because it just doesn't happen. That day never happens.
Mm.
So I found, yeah, shaking as many hands as I could, getting in people's faces without being too annoying. Following up with McLaren, letting them know my performance, keeping them in the loop, showing them, demonstrating my technical side with the car performance, and really just pushing on the commercial side. If I decided not to get out in the bed in the morning, to be honest, like there's no one there that's going to really push it for me. until you kind of really get to the world stage, winning at Le Mans. Maybe then you'll get the envelopes in the post. But like, to make that career happen, it's kind of like it's the same in any form of business. Yes, the business might run itself when it's at the very top, but in order to get to that level, if you decide not to, especially when you're so ingrained in the growth stages, you need to be there to push everything and don't wait for that phone call to come through.
Interesting, man. I know nothing about racing, just as a disclaimer, other than loving the sport and following it. It's interesting you said you know, you didn't wait for the call. You kind of pushed on those doors to get open. And I know part of the story then when you and I chatted was not only did you want to be an amazing racer, but you wanted to understand the business of racing. And so, you made a decision to go into to finance so that you had some background on that, not just like being a great technical driver, but understanding like, hey, these two worlds need to come together. What was that? When did you come to that realization that you had to have these two skills together to be where you wanted to go in the sport?
Yeah, so like to give everyone an understanding of how racing works and how it's transformed over the last 30 years. If you take Lewis Hamilton, who was coming through karts at a young age, 1994, 1995, he came from an underprivileged background. His father worked two jobs tirelessly, and at the age of 10, he got scouted by the former CEO of McLaren F1, Ron Dennis, paid all the way through his junior Formula career, and now is the highest paid Formula One driver to ever exist. So it was possible then. Ne- Step forward to today, you have 10-year-olds spending €250,000 on a season's karting. The average Formula One driver spends between 10 to 15 million euros to get to Formula One. So you either have to come from a very wealthy background, which wasn't the case for me, or you had to make something work, and you had to come up with innovative ways, meet the right people, build the right package around you, so that you could deliver. You could be the best driver in the world, but unless you have built the right ecosystem around you, you're not going to succeed. It's not really like tennis where you can just go out into your yard and play tennis. The equivalent training session in a modern GT car probably costs 20, 30, 40,000 euros. So it was when I was, and I currently have ADHD, and probably helped me a lot in many ways coming up through in both an academic and commercial sense and with the racing. But yeah, I struggled in school. And we spoke about this as well. It was at the time my teachers always tried to make all of us good at what we weren't good at and
Mm.
didn't really excel on what we were already good at. So we're a jack of all trades and a master of none, which turns out to be total nonsense in the real world. So we never really kind of got to hone in on what we're good at. But to be honest, my school didn't even know what I did in terms of racing, nor did they promote it. They were more concerned about us going to church on a Sunday rather than representing Ireland on a world stage. Yeah, I knew, even though I struggled in school and didn't get the best grades, that to make this work, because the business side was so important, probably at the age of 14, I knew that I needed to excel in school. So it probably took me 2 years to implement, but at the age of 16, I really knuckled down in school. I got a really good, what's the equivalent of A levels? It's a leaving certificate in Ireland. And I went to study business and economics in Trinity College. I balanced my final year exams with my first year semi-professionally racing in the UK, which I found was like really good for time management and structure in your kind of weeks and years. And yeah, so I'd say it was kind of in my mid-teens that I knew that I really, really had to work. And a lot of people say it's 90% business, 10% skill. Um, I would debate that somewhat, but I think the talent gets you noticed, and the business side keeps you on the grid.
Wow, man, I mean, it's like you are your own entrepreneur of sorts, right? Like you got to have the skill to drive the car, obviously, but you got to build an ecosystem, a business around you and a brand. And um, kudos to you, man, to figure that out at 16. That like that's the path. Did that did that relevance of I work in schools. I was a former teacher, assistant principal. I found that students, when they don't have relevance for what they're doing, they tend to struggle, right? It's like, hey, why do I need to know this? Like, why am I taking this? How is this going to help me? It sounds like at some point that relevance kicked in, particularly around sports, motorsports, that, hey, I can actually apply this to something that can be useful to me. Was that like a light bulb moment for you, just to say, look, I get where this could take me and why I need to kind of buckle down and just kind of do this.
No. I think maybe some people, Max Verstappen, it was like Formula One's the end goal. This is what I need to do. And for me, it was like, especially like not having the financial backing behind me, from my family to just go for everything and only focus on the racing. That made it that much harder. So for me, it was like incremental steps. And kind of my message to all the younger audience is, you don't have to know what you want to do, and you know that as well. From a young age, you don't need to be ultra disciplined, and this is my strategic goal, and here's the steps. It helps, of course, but I think like for me, sitting here racing a Lamborghini GT3 car, my 21-year-old self 5 years ago would not have believed it. I can tell you, if I was speaking to myself at 21 years old, I just wouldn't have believed you. And that's how quick it was. Always kind of, I want to do well in business, I want to do well in motorsport, and it was just okay. Like, let's keep taking it to the next step. Let's not get too far ahead of ourselves, because I think you can get like doomed in your own self doubt when it comes to that, like too worried about the bigger picture. It's like, if you go into business, like, okay, how am I going to raise all this money? How am I going to get to 10 million EBITDA by the end of the year? Like, that's probably the wrong approach to take. It was incremental. It wasn't really a light bulb moment for me. Moral of the story for me is always try to take these things one step ahead at a time. And yeah, sorry, that's what I was going to move on to as well. I think for people with ADHD, they struggle so much more. It's clinically proven that they struggle more in the things that they're not fundamentally interested in. So
Mm.
for me, that was always a really, really difficult part. It's like, I never really had a purpose in school, nor did I have an interest in 80% of the subjects. But when I did have a purpose and when I had something to work towards, especially with my condition of ADHD, it made things all the more easier to work towards.
I had a guest on who also had ADHD. He puts data centers on the moon, and I think it's a superpower. I said this to him, and he said yes. ADHD can be a superpower. Makes you think differently than 90% of the human population. Have you found that to be true?
Yeah, I think it's twofold. I think I love it. I'm very much a transparent person, so I'm not complicated at all. What you see is what you get. You'll know within 10 seconds if I've annoyed you, and I generally sort things out as quickly as can be done. So I love with ADHD transparency. It gives you probably impulsiveness, gets you into a bit of trouble sometimes as well. Generally that's kind of like how I like to get things done in a transparent manner. And it kind of has allowed me to think outside the box with a lot of things. And I think less on the business side, but more if we speak on the performance side in racing. I had taken medication when I was prescribed it as a kid, which probably filled in the bits that I was missing in my brain, which was great for studying. But when it actually came to decisiveness in a race. So that's what I love about ADHD is you don't think, you just go off all your instincts. And I have 17 years of instincts and experience to go off. And everything's no second guess. It's just like, when you see a gap, you go for it. When you want to brake, you brake. When you want to take a corner, absolutely full speed, you take it full speed. And when I was taking my medication, that made me more concentrated. It made me hyper fixate on things to evaluate everything in a pragmatic way, which there was no fluidity to it. There
Mm.
was no rhythm and decisiveness to it. So when I come up to a corner, I'd be still thinking about the last corner, how I could have made it better. And I'd be thinking about the implications if I went for a move and it didn't work out. So I think the same can be kind of sort of applied to a business setting. If we look at it from a bigger picture, it's like people with ADHD, they see things in a creative way, they're impulsive, they're decisive, they just go for it. Be the right thing, but generally doing something, you'll always regret not doing something. You'll always regret the things that you didn't do. You won't regret as much maybe the bad decisions that you've made. And I think that's the biggest thing for any entrepreneur, anyone in business, is actually just taking the leap and doing it.
Yeah, that's there's so many directions I could the racetrack as a, example of life. You see those you see those corners. So as you were going through that, did you come off the medicine and just say, "Look, this part of me in this, at this age for what I'm doing, I actually need those gut instincts, the things that, may have been issues for me in school are actually very applicable where I'm at." Was that like did you come off and realize that that was a part of you that you needed to kind of let fully express in on a racetrack?
Yeah, I suppose it was a period of trial and error. I was diagnosed with ADHD when I was 13. I started taking medication immediately for it. And it was just kind of years of experience that I learned what settings and what days would be fitting to take it and what days wouldn't be.
Mm,
If I have a busy day, it could genuinely make me 50, 60, 70% more efficient. With ADHD, you have a terrible tendency to get distracted. Me, I'm very hyperactive. Like I'll completely forget a lot of stuff. And like an academic manner, or if I'm doing work on my computer, I would definitely take it. But I suppose like none of that's relevant when it comes to like any sport I do. Whether like it used to be mountain biking before I broke my foot, and that was explicitly put in the contract that I couldn't do. But that
yeah.
was another great example of a sport that I found it was such a deterrent as opposed to helping you. And it was probably trial and error as I was younger as a kid that I really figured what worked for me.
Amazing, man. Um, so, we trace back a little bit. I just want to talk about this aspect of it. Um, when you were at school, there were a lot of things that, people didn't encourage you. And I think you said to me at some point, someone said at 12 years old, Alex, you know, we don't think you're going to amount to much or anything. Um, what a horrible thing to say to a child. But unfortunately, it's not uncommon, right? Like my dad is an example who also has ADHD. Was told the same thing, ended up being a colonel in the army and, incredibly successful. But I don't understand why schools say these things to kids. And then you see these stories, you fast forward their stories and they do amazing things in life. But walk me through that a little bit. Like what was that? I think you also had incredibly supportive parents as you went through that period of time. But talk to me about that moment. Like what was happening in school when they said that to you?
Yeah, like when I was younger in school, like I would have got bullied at a younger age. And I was never good at rugby, and our school was a big rugby school. So that was the first big no-no. I was always very deservedly an absolute rat in school. So anything that I was told in that sense would have been fully deserved. But again, like I was a person who had no feet coordination. I still don't understand how I can interchangeably use the pedals and do the techniques in racing, but I couldn't kick a football, I couldn't do rugby. And again, the at that time, and I think it's actually shifted somewhat in our skills since we've left, but they tried to make you good at rugby. It's like I'm never going to be good at rugby. Why not focus on what I am good at?
Mm,
And the teachers, as a product of that, and like in class, that my energy wasn't channeled to the right things to tell me it never amount to anything. And I think that, do you know what? That's a very Irish thing. It's like there's especially with older generations, there's a lot of begrudgery, there's a lot of harshness. My grandfather was told that by his father. He was
mm,
told he'd never amount to anything, and he's built a very successful business, and has lovely children and great grandchildren. So, um, he like that is an Irish thing. But I suppose we were speaking about this kind of mentality in school, that kids are never given the chance to really kind of hone in on what they are good at. And I definitely push and strive for that more. And there's a great guy online called William Scott, and he speaks about this a lot. He says that the people in school that got it easy, that looked good, that were sociable, that were good at sport or whatever. He was like, most of those people are absolutely irrelevant today. They either go into drugs at a later stage because everything was so easy. They didn't have to be disciplined. They didn't have to work hard at something. Um, they didn't have to. They didn't know what it feels like to fail and have to prove their self worth and really kind of come from nothing or at a disadvantage. And he said generally you'll find with the people that struggled a bit more in school or were overweight or weren't the most attractive or whatever, they have to work so much harder to get it, and they actually know what it takes to succeed in life. Because when you get out of uni, no one gives a crap what you did in school or
Mm.
if you're part of the cool kids or whatever. I think that was like he was very articulate in what he read about that, which was a very interesting thing. And I would really push and strive for that in school nowadays. And I think there is a shift more towards it, or a movement, should I say, more towards it. But I think that needs to be greater. I think we really, really need to hone in with kids and teach them that anything is possible. If you like, if you're told a million times a day that you won't be become this, you're not surrounded with the right people, especially from a young age, because we're growing in what we think is acceptable, what we surround ourselves, our education, our religion, our family. If all of that is like negative energy and not giving you a platform to be able to do it, then it's going to be much harder to do it. And you touched upon my parents. My parents very much so were perfect for that. They taught me discipline. They certainly didn't let me off the hook when I was being bold in school, and they gave me something that got me motivated, that drove me in school, which was to be racing every weekend. Um, and they didn't push me to do it, which I'd also think is the other extreme of it, which is equally as important to your parents not caring about you at all. I've seen so many kids' careers being ended by their fathers pushing them too hard, putting too much pressure on them from a young age. And I read an article the other day on Rory McIlroy teaching parents on how the children should be good golfers. And it's like, bring them out, let them hit a few golf balls, bring them out to a big green area, you kind of potter about,
Mm.
don't pull them up in their swing. Make sure you bring them back in before dark, before they get tired. Don't force them to do it when they don't want to do it.
Yeah.
And it resonated with me a lot because it was exactly the way my dad was involved in my racing growing up. He would be supportive, he would be there, he would help me when he thought it was a little bit necessary because he was very experienced in the field himself, but he never overstepped any boundaries. He didn't get too involved. He didn't get too involved in the nitty gritty. He didn't
Mm.
push me or pressurize me anymore. So it was absolutely perfect. And if anyone has parents lucky enough, or if anyone's lucky enough to have parents that give them that sort of platform growing up, it will make succeeding in any discipline all the more easy.
Yeah, it's interesting, Alex, when you talk about that because it's such a I'm a parent of 3 kids, and it is such a fine balance. Um, you know, so, make you want your kids to be successful, but you don't wanna push them so hard in that it becomes they just lose interest. I've seen that too in a lot of sports, even at a young age, you know, our daughter was interested in ice skating, but at some point she wasn't as interested, and that has to be okay, right? Like, you have to give them an opportunity to find those spots. So it sounds like your parents did a great job of that. Thank God for that. If any parents are listening, I know it's not an easy thing to do to kind of find that balance between like, hey, I see potential in this, but I don't want to push them so hard that they quit and they lose interest early. And your story is a great example of that. How many days? I'm assuming you didn't win every race. As you go through that experience, what have the losses taught you, as you kind of come back from a race and say, I didn't win. I've seen the pictures of you online winning. They're awesome. And it looks very cool, but I'm assuming on the background of that were some losses that got you there. What did those losses teach you?
Well, the great saying is that you win, or that you learn a lot more on failure than you do in winning. I think there's a mix of both. I think you definitely learn in winning, and I think it's really good from a confidence and a morale perspective going into the year, knowing that you can win. So there's definitely learnings and
Mm.
confidence boosts to be taken from winning. And anyone who says that winning doesn't teach you anything, uh, I would disagree with that. But I do think losing, the number one thing I would definitely take from that is resilience, 100%. If I take it from a young age, it took me 2 years, 2 full years, actually longer, maybe even 3 years before I won my first big karting race. I remember it was 2011, and anyone who's close to me will remember this moment as well. It was a long season from March to October. Bearing in mind I was 11 years of age at this stage, and I was going for my big first national championship. And it was me and this other guy who kind of won all year. And it came into the last weekend, and the team had given me a specific command. They'd make a signal, and I had to slow down to catch him to get the fastest lap, pretty much. I had to win the race and I had to get the fastest lap. And I knew if I was ahead for the full race, that I wouldn't get the fastest lap, because when you're behind, you get what's called a slipstream. So trying to to do all that and time it whilst making engine adjustments, and it was like it wasn't just about driving fast. It was about a game of chess. Um, and staying calm in the moment, because to let someone go further ahead of you
Mm,
psychologically is quite a difficult thing to do. But knowing that you need to have that gap to chase them in to get the fastest lap, which was the points vindictive at the time. When I look at that, for an 11-year-old, my younger sister's 11, it's a lot of pressure to put on a kid. And we were battling all throughout the last lap. In hindsight, I should have done something slightly different with my car placement, and I lost the race by this much. It was by 100th of a second, and I lost it. And it was like that was 3 years of preparation to get to that moment, and I lost it. And I just remember, like, I will never forget that. And that's 15 years ago. I lost it. I went over and I shook his hand and I said, "Well done." And my dad was like, "Just make sure you do that. That's the most important thing." And I just remember
mm,
my dad and his friend at the time were just like absolutely sick for about a week afterwards. So that was the first one. You fast forward to after just winning the 2022 Motorsport Ireland Young Driver of the Year award. I was racing with Aston Martin. I just got signed up to the Aston Martin Academy, and I was racing in all over Europe. I get to Monza. It's my first ever race, and I am buzzing. I have all the traction. I've just been crowned the best young driver under 23 years of age in Ireland. My sponsors are buzzing. Everything's gone in the right direction. I have the support of Sport Ireland, and in my first ever race, and there's contact with another car. Another car makes a mistake, and boom, my car. I have the biggest crash of my life. The car is absolutely destroyed. Um, and just because he gets disqualified or he's told up, he's at blame, doesn't mean he repairs your car. And it turns out the car was underinsured at the time by the team. So there was a lot of damage, big
mm,
financial implications for me. Earlier that year, um, a German team had screwed me over for quite a significant sum of money as well. And I found myself in the midpoint of the year having had a crash, got stung by that team. Then I switched over to McLaren. I had a number of DNFs, which is it did not finish because the car broke down. And now we have no results to show. I'm quite significantly in debt. And I just said to my parents, I was just like, what do I do here?" And my dad was like, "I think you're too out of your depth." So it was like at that moment when I knew, fair enough, I'm an adult at this stage. It's not my parents' mess to clean up, of course, absolutely. And this is my journey. Um, I knew that the only person that was going to make something happen here was me. The only person that was going to recover this is me. And it's the same when you're an entrepreneur. If your business is in turmoil, your staff or your suppliers, they're not going to help you. They're not
mm,
going to recover your mess. So I knew that was very hard for me. I had no results. I had crashes. It had knocked my confidence because I knew psychologically I could not have another accident again. And you can't be
mm,
thinking about that. That's like every day walking into work going, I can't afford for anything to go wrong here. I can't afford to drop a bag of cement. I can't afford for a window to break if I'm fitting. Like if
yeah,
you have that mentality going in every day, something will go wrong. Because the more you try not to crash in a race car, the more you probably will crash. So that was a huge obstacle getting me over. I've lost the drive with a team. I have to go to court in Germany with another team, crashes, reliability, all within 1 year. And then it's not just you that you're responsible for, it's your sponsors and the manufacturers. That was a difficult time for me. I have to come out of that myself, like at the age of 2023. And I had a brilliant season then at the end. I had two good races at the end of 2024, which set me up for my best season to date in 2025, which was 8 wins, 4 second places, and became the first ever official Lamborghini driver for Ireland. But for sure, it's like the big thing for us is if we have a 2 hour long race, you need the strategy to go right. You need reliability to be good on the car. You need your performance to be good. You need your co-driver's performance to be good. You need the pit stops to be perfect. You need all external factors, rain, people not crashing into you, everything to go right. And all it takes is one thing to go wrong. So it makes a sport with such complexity very difficult to
Mm,
always win.
yeah.
Therefore, you have so many downs and failures that from that moment in 2023, I have had so many hiccups or things that might look like they're going wrong, or there was a recent one that I can't quite explain now, but my mom was like, "Are you not worried about that?" I was like, "After 23, no, not at all." And it turned out to be
Mm.
absolutely fine. It actually turned out to be great. But the confidence and resilience that I've learned from those lessons in motorsport, I can carry into any discipline in life, and I'm very grateful for that.
Yeah. Wow, man. From like best year of your life to, I want to say worst year, but a very challenging year right after, and then pick up, pick yourself up, get those things resolved, and obviously things are moving in the right direction again for you. What is it? I think a lot of times when people think about racing, I was listening. There's a podcast called, why can't I think of it right now? I was listening to it because they have acquired. Sorry, there it goes. And they were doing a Formula One, kind of the history of Formula One and Le Mans, and I know that's kind of on your target list for 2029. But it started off kind of like a cowboy-ish sport where there was a lot of like, it was dangerous. There were, lots of things going on. The people in it were, chasing, knowing things could go wrong, and oftentimes they did. But I don't think when most people think about the sport, all of the things that go into it, from the mental discipline, the team that surrounds you, the business aspects of it. So I want to kind of divide this up into two parts. One, what is that individual piece like? What are you doing to make sure your mind's in the right place? You're not thinking about those things that went wrong in previous races. You're really focused in and dialed in on what's in front of you, both mentally and physically. What does a day in the life of Alex getting ready for a race look like?
Well, your first anecdote of it being a cowboy sport is absolutely correct. Um, and quite a good one at that. Yeah, like, well, I was looking at a
Yeah.
video the other day of old Formula One cars when they came in for pit stops, and here's the mechanics with a watering can pouring them over, pouring them over the tires, trying to cool them down. And go, wow, this sport has certainly changed. Not for the better in a lot of ways, but it has changed. And how it has changed is it has just got so much more professional, so much safer, so so much to like you had Juan Manuel Fangio in the 50s, who was like quite old. I think he was like in his mid 50s, which is old for a racing driver, when he was world champion. And now the drivers are complete athletes. Um, you have simulators. I have one right behind me here, and that means that I can practice the exact car configuration, the track configuration. They're all laser scanned. I can do a million laps on that. So that means when I get to the track, I know it inside out. So that just
Mm,
brings the level up to another bar. You have the commercial aspect to it, which is now very, very high, which brings all the levels just up to another level. So everyone's looking for these. Years ago, it was like, who had the biggest set of balls?
yeah.
Uh, who was willing,
Yeah.
to die in that car. 'Cause, you could play with the limit, but if you stepped over the limit, you were dead, and that was just a simple part of it. Safety doesn't really come into it as much for us, or danger doesn't come into it as much for us anymore, because the safety is so good. But because the levels are so high now, everyone has to be an athlete.
Mm,
If I take weight for an example, okay, so Weight is measured. It isn't measured in some championships. If you're too light in some championships or series, they'll put in lead as a substitute. In other ones, they don't. So the championship I did last year, there was none of that. And to give you context, I was racing in Italy last year, and the difference in between pole position and sixth was 6/100ths of a second. 10 kilos makes 1/10 of a second, a tenth and a half of a second. So 3 kilos in body weight could be the difference between you qualifying first and sixth,
Wow.
which is pretty crazy.
Yeah.
So from a mental perspective, to answer your question, look, psychologically, I work with sports psychologist Alan Harry from Motorsport Ireland, who is very good at compartmentalizing what you're feeling. He will go into, weekend reviews and analysis, what went well, what didn't go well, and what will you do better for the next time. Because people often look at the outcomes. So you might have won the race, but did everyone else crash?
Mm,
Or you might have came last, but did you win every practice session? You might have qualified on pole. You might have led every lap. You might have had the best performance of your life, and the car breaks down at the last corner. How can you say that that's a worse performance than winning the race? If you
mm,
were drinking beer the night before and then everyone just crashed the next day.
yeah.
So he very much so takes an analytic approach. He removes any subjective biases or cognitive biases out of the question and helps you to look at it for what it is. Um, we spoke, I think, before about chimp, chimp in your head that is
Yeah.
always giving you, and we're always susceptible to negativity bias. So we'll always think of the worst thing that can happen, even though it might be on a small percentage. That's why people purchase insurance on their homes. That's why people, they'll always insure what they don't want to happen. So mentally, that has been very effective for me, to my performance in something I would have considered I always was strong on. I didn't let my emotions get the better of me. But when I got into something as professional as it is now,
Yeah.
I definitely I definitely benefited from that service. And the next one is on the performance side. So we'll have a racing simulator, which will be the biggest part of our training. And then the second part will be cardiovascular and strength and conditioning training. So I have a Whoop here, which I monitor on quite a lot to see um, what's my VO2 max, what sort of fitness and training am I getting? Is my sleep good? How's my recovery? Um, and inside the car, it gets up to 60, 65 degrees centigrade, which is like um,
Hot.
160 degrees Fahrenheit.
It gets
Um,
that hot.
yeah, it gets like in and around or just below what it is in the sauna. And bearing in mind, you're wearing a fully fireproof overlayer. You're wearing underlayers. You're wearing a balaclava. You're wearing a helmet. And you're locked into this position where you're going 300 kilometers an hour around corners, braking. So it gets very physical. There was one race last year where I did 35 minutes stint and I burned 900 calories. My average heart rate being 177 and my max heart rate being 191. So the heat is massive. So you really need to be strong to turn the wheel. You need to be strong to push the pedals. We need to put in about 85 to 90 kilos of force to our left foot when we're braking. That repeated 10 times a lap with however many laps in a stint can take its toll on your body. You'd be walking around with a bit of a limp after some race weekend. The two of them have really increased. The knowledge around that has really increased because the bar has been brought so high now. It's now a sport of ultra precision. And I kind of like the way it was 20 years ago, that it was more on the raw talent. Someone getting into the car and showing what the capability of man was and dancing with the edge of danger and stuff. I love that personally. But that's the way it's gone today. And you need to be really, really disciplined in the two of them to be at the top of your game.
Amazing, man. You guys are athletes. I didn't realize how much went into racing, but now kind of getting that context, it's amazing. I think people, we think about entrepreneurs, a lot of times it's easy to neglect the physical components of kind of what that does and kind of generates for the rest of you. You talk about the Whoop. I feel like there's periods of your life where you can ignore that. I personally have lived that where I'm, just super busy and that just doesn't become, that it's important in your life. But I feel like it's always important. Like you've got to bring that in somehow, and obviously in what you're doing, it's critical. Um, so walk me through the you've got you, and then you've got the team around you. And there seems to be, you talked about a kind of a psychologist, a sports psychologist that walks you through that. You've got the physical training, and then you get out on the track, and there's a team of people that surrounds you. How much influence does the driver have on that? Is that something that you get to kind of coach and work with? Like, what are the relationships that you form there, and what's that balance between like the driver and that team? Does that impact how the race goes?
Yeah, good question. First of all, in terms of I have started to build a little bit of a commercial team around me, a bit of a strength and conditioning team, and I I'm giving a sports psychologist from Motorsport Ireland. I'll have access to these people around me. I have a partnership with my gym, West Park Fitness, who also supply me a strength and conditioning coach. So I've kind of built a nice team around me of people that support me to really make this happen. But on the race weekends, um, the driver can have as little or as much influence on the team as he dictates. There'll always be leaders and there'll always be people who follow the herd. Ultimately, the driver is the only person who gets the car across the line, but there's so many people behind the scenes. There's the driver coach, there's an engineer, there's technicians, there's fuel people, there's team managers, there's team owners, there's strategists, there's on one car alone. Now it's nothing compared to Formula One, but on one car alone, there's probably for us 10 people, which is a big team around you. And I suppose communication is extremely important, and being good at driver feedback is really important. And I suppose before communication comes technical knowledge. You have to know what you're talking about, um, and you have to have a good feel. And I think one is probably equally as important as the other. One can be taught, which is technical understanding, and the other one actually you can have the best engineer in the world, but they mightn't actually feel what's going on, and you can
Mm,
overcomplicate some things as well. Um, and that's where combining your technical expertise with your feel, which I would actually argue is probably more important, and then communicating that in an easily digestible, simplistic, but pragmatic way. So you have to I and I teach this to younger drivers that we manage. You have to have a process. You have to start off by saying, okay, was there any technical issues? Was there a wheel that was vibrating? Was the window not closing? Was the steering wheel off center? Was the brake not pressing? Was there a spanner lying around in the middle of the car? The most that's the thing that can be annoying you the most when you're in the car, but you forget about it when you get out of the car. And then it's only when you drive out the first lap, you're like, oh no, I forgot to tell the team about that. So that's the first part. Then you need to like distinguish what is the car doing, on the corner entry. Is it moving under braking? Is it doing this? Is it rolling over on the rear, on the exit? Whatever. Not to bore you too much with the technical parts, but then it's like, okay, what's the problem? And what's the mechanism that's going to help this? And that's where someone with really good technical understanding of a car and its dynamics
mm,
can really make the difference. And I've seen it with some drivers, if their technical understanding or their feel isn't good, or even it might be good, but they're not translating it the right way, engineers can misinterpret that and not give you the results. And if anyone is uncertain in what they're feeling or what they're saying, I have seen it time and time again. The engineers and the team do not take you seriously. They go off their own
mm,
intuition.
yeah.
Generally, there's no one's intuition that is better than a driver that knows what they're talking about. And a driver that has a good feel, they're the person that's in the car, they're the person that's feeling what's going on. And if they're good at building a team around them and pushing for what they want, they will be sure to succeed. But the number one thing there, finish that point, is balancing leadership and what you want with being a team player. And
Mm,
it's something I've had to learn coming into racing as a single driver into GTs and endurance racing, where you have a team of two or three drivers or even four drivers. You have to compromise. with each other. You might want something, they might want something different. It's about working together and getting the best for everyone together to get that car to the finish line first.
Amazing, man. It's interesting as you were talking about that balance between like a, in software terms, the subject matter expert, the driver, and the engineer. As I've built, what, three companies, mainly software companies, that balance that you described is exactly the same in building software, right? Truly understanding that problem. But if you're not able to communicate that to your engineers in a way that's convincing, that like you understand what the real problem, you clearly understand the problem, it can lead engineers to go off and do their own thing and their own assumptions, and that doesn't always lead to the right place. So interesting that balance is not just in the race car. I think that happens in a lot of places. That's cool, man. So um, let's talk about the business of motorsports. So you've got you, the driver, you've got the team around you, and then you need supporters, right? You need people that kind of come in and support the project. So they're not maybe in the day to day, but they're in relationship with you. Walk me through that aspect of it. And has that always been a part of the equation? Like, have you always had to kind of have sponsors to move to every level? Is that something that is particularly important now?
So as soon as I moved from carts into cars, it was like my parents were like, "You're on your own 2 feet now, so you have to go out and what kind of went from going around with the begging hat for €500 each has quickly transformed into a business with a couple of zeros on the end of that." And yeah, so like each level I've gone up with, um, has typically got more expensive. I've got to a stage now where you'll be getting subsidies from the manufacturer, or Lamborghini are bringing part of the funding. But to get to the stage where you're a factory driver and paid by Lamborghini themselves, the highest seniority in there, you have to invest, and it's exactly like a business in that sense that you can, unless you a business is not going to succeed unless you buy all the right equipment, hire all the right staff, put everything in place to give you the best chance to succeed. And for me, it might take slightly longer because I don't have that big checkbook behind me. But now we're really getting into the serious realms. I have 12 great partners behind me. Um, Currently searching for two more for that ambition of winning Le Mans by 2029. And we've made a huge step into GT3 for this year. Like, to give you an understanding of my year, I spend most of my time, it might be email outreach, it might be planning activations, it might be producing content. I might have a corporate day in a GT3 car where I take my sponsors out in the passenger seat beside me around world famous tracks like Spa, bring clients of theirs over to events. I might have a recent sponsor of mine. I got a software into an engineering company. And off the back of that, I got sponsorship. And you're always looking for ways to bring ROI to them. So, as long as it's not getting in the way of my performance, the rest of my time is kind of conducting B2B and I'm making this all work. It's great that I have such a good community around me striving for this one ambition of winning them all. Um, but yeah, for sure, it's kind of like taking me a good few years of trial and error mainly to get to the stage where it's really succeeding like it is now.
So what do you when you're talking to sponsors, like in some ways, like they're supporting, they obviously want something, I'm assuming some type of ROI like you explained, but I'm assuming it doesn't probably start there, right? Like they are investing, and this is an assumption on my part, Alex, but they're investing in you. So how does that, how do you work with them to kind of what's your pitch? Like if you go to them, what's that process you take them through? And I can just from meeting you in person at Anthropy, I can tell you're a very genuine and kind of authentic person. And that shows through. But is that where you start? Is like, hey, let's build a relationship. Walk me through a little bit of your process.
For sure. And I think it is. it starts off as them investing in you. So I never make a promise because it can be often very difficult to deliver on that you're going to double your ROI from investing in a motorsport driver because most of the time that's just not true. Um, it normally runs the other way around that they're investing in me. They want to get some of the deliverables that I can guarantee them. They want to be a part of this journey, going to the races, part of the success story. And then it's like at the end of the year, oh, wow, he's delivered us this, he's got us this client. That kind of cements the relationship in place. And then in terms of the pitch process, it's about, I wouldn't call it a pitch, I would call it surrounding myself with people that are aligned with the same objectives. We made a mistake that like 3 years ago, I brought on a sponsor that it just wasn't really the parallel or the interest there between them and a motorsport driver. And it was a mistake that I made because I wasn't able to bring them on the next year because they got internal pressure from the staff saying, can we not be putting this into charity? Um, and I've made the promise since then that I won't accept anyone. I want people that I can see their businesses aligned. I can see that they're aligned. I can see that they want to be a part of it because, like any business, if you want to maintain people, if you want to carry them on to the really long term or over 3 years or whatever, they have to be aligned. They have to be
Mm.
want to be a part of it, and you have to be able in your mind to bring them some sort of an ROI. So, yeah, I think that's my number one value would be being transparent from the start,
Mm.
um, getting to know them, seeing are they interested, hearing their story and what ways because everyone's different. Some you can you can be pitching all day long to someone about brand awareness for someone who does B2B products, or they could be doing B2C products, and you could be pushing to get them investors or clients. It doesn't work that way. So it's really about understanding their business and tailoring whatever offer you have towards that. And if something works out, great. Uh, and hopefully you can maintain it for many years to come.
I did want to ask you one last question about we were talking about how the business and the authenticity of raising money, and I've had to raise money a couple times for companies, and founders always ask, like what's the secret? And as I've heard your story, and I've heard other people's stories, who've been successful at this, and just my own personal experiences, being authentic with people, the things the things you don't know to a degree, right? Like you have to be confident in what you're doing. They have to believe that you're able to deliver, right? Like they have to believe that you're a good driver, right? Else it doesn't matter. You can be authentic as you want. Um, but that piece of it, being authentic with those and having that connection, I think people underestimate how much that influences people's, wanting to invest in you, right? Like you have to start there. You do need the other pieces, like you said. You need to be competent. You got to be able to deliver an ROI. You got to be able to do all those things. But if they don't like you, and vice versa, I feel like as a founder raising money, especially at the beginning stages, if it's your first time, you're like the worst check I ever got was the easiest check I ever got. It was this guy I met. I didn't really vet. We were raising money. It was 20K. He was like, he just wrote a check for 20K. And it ended up being one of the worst decisions I ever made later. I didn't know much about this guy. And I too made the same decision. I was like, I will only accept money from people that are
Tell me
value
more
aligned.
about that because I'd love to learn about that particular circumstance. What happened with the 20K? Why was it a bad decision?
Well, the way that he wanted to, so I'll give you I was in this conference, guy was next to me. I pitched him on, what we were doing. He's like, oh, what are you doing? And I told him, he's like, oh, I'd love to invest. And this was my first round of really raising money. So I was, like, oh, I was super excited. So I was like, oh, any money is good money. That was kind of my perspective at the time. And I found out later that he had screwed over a couple of startups because he had some terms in that contract and he executed on those terms where most people don't use those terms. It's just kind of like, but he, had used those terms on a couple other companies. So I didn't do my due diligence on this, and I should have. And it was in the round of money, it was a small round, but every little, piece of momentum felt like so critical. So, and it's hard to, I feel like, as you're fundraising, to say no, no, I don't want that 20K, when you're kind of scrapping for every little bit at the beginning. But I wish I would have said no to that check. I wish I would have done that. And I made a decision then. Who you are as a person matters, as much as it matters to that investor. It matters to me too.
Yeah.
So I want to know you a little bit. I want to understand your values and make sure that we're aligned, no matter how big that check might be, because I know that it can go wrong, and usually does if you don't have those things in place. So definitely was a lesson learned, in my experience. Do your homework on both sides. Like, it's not just them writing you a check. You need to vet them because they're a partner with you. Now, the best experience on the reverse of that was someone that I got to know, by the Craig Cummings, and he's an investor. He's now become a friend, but he not only wrote the check, but every time I was in Austin, I stayed at his house to save money when we were first getting going. Like, his family was supportive. We've remained friends, and he's been a mentor to me over 10 years. And that's someone that I got to know first, and then invest. And so I felt very comfortable with that. So those are the types of things, the types of relationships. But I feel like early on, someone wants to write you a check, you just take it. You're like, oh yeah, just next, next, just get as much piled up as possible. And I've learned that's definitely the wrong approach.
Yeah, for sure. I
Yeah,
agree totally.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
I get like, yeah. I think just to mirror what you said is like in those earlier stages of your career, like when you need the most, and probably when you don't have the most amount of experience to kind of be questioning them, you will take it on. And yeah, I've had experience with people that have kind of like done their due diligence on me as much, and we've built up a relationship. There has been people of very recent that I've gone to like 10 people before I've done the deal. And that just makes that's probably from experience of getting screwed over by that team 3 years ago in Germany. I'll never make that mistake again. And generally, the people that you formulate opinions and relationships with over a long period of time and trust them, because it takes so long to build up trust. It only takes a second to kill it. And before we got cut off there, you were speaking about authenticity and how important that is in uh, today's world. And I'd have to agree with you. I think being authentic, being true to yourself, that really, really shows in the long run. And it's probably another great trait of having ADHD is that what you see is what you get. People love that. They don't like people who hide their cards. And I think it's something great about Irish people as well. And it's something I had to adapt to when I started doing business outside of Ireland,
mm,
was to not trust a handshake. That got me screwed over on 2 occasions. Um, but generally, we're very fortunate with Irish people. Like, if they shake your hand and they commit to something, they deliver on it. And it's just our nation and the values of our nation.
I
And
love that.
when we've gone to AI, where people can no longer distinguish what's real and what's not, so and they can no longer see the authenticity of an email. They don't know whether it's you writing it. They don't know what to believe. There's misinformation going around. Um, there's so many businesses out there nowadays that aren't delivering any value, or aren't doing anything good, or are out there to grab your money and aren't there for the long term betterment. And you really have to fish through them. It's like the older generation saying, "This is a scam. Can I believe this? Can I trust this?" There's no longer that trust in society as much as there was. But that has then rewarded people that are transparent, that do have a good reputation, to really strive. There's no quick route to success, and the people who um, under promise and over deliver, and stay true to their values, I think will eventually come out on top.
I agree, Alex. And part of the reason for this podcast is to tell those honest stories, because behind the scenes of every journey, every entrepreneur who goes through something, every person that has a dream like yours to be a race car driver, there's a moment where, kind of where we started, where you're the only one that sees it, right? And you're trying to get people to fill in those chairs and come along on that journey with you. And you've got to have that conviction as a founder. And part of that is just being authentic about the journey. And I feel like a lot of times, you see the maybe that one shot from the beginning and you see Alex, in front of the Lamborghini with the trophy and he's winning and it's all that. But there's a lot that got there and people need to see that part of the journey so they understand like, hey, yeah, it may look like a snapshot on Instagram, but in real life there was a lot of things that happened along the way that got you to that point. And so people need to expect that that is going to be the journey for them as well, as they go through it. So I love that you were able to share that journey with our audience, and that's what part of why we're doing this. So thank you for sharing that. Last bit, I know you've got Le Mans on the docket, 2029. So I will definitely be following along as you go through this journey and be as supportive as I can to that process for you. What does that mean for you? What's in the next 4 years of Alex's life look like?
Yeah, so year one in 2026 is Italian GT3. 27 and 28 is going to be a combination between GT World Challenge and IMSA, which is the highest level American series. And then 2029 is World Endurance Championship. As much training, as much commercial support, as many races as I can possibly win. Also, I have to deliver. So it's going to be exciting. There's going to be a lot of work. And I'm glad to really kind of come on today. I'm glad myself that I've been able to, come to the point where I'm happy to discuss my failures, happy to discuss the dark times, happy to discuss all the time things that I haven't got right. Because as you say, like a lot of people can look at a snapshot online, and I think that's one of the many downfalls about social media is that it's portrayed to be picture perfect and that everyone's winning and yeah, my life is great. That's not the reality of things. And it's okay to have failed. It's okay not to have good times. And when you do share them out, you build stronger. And I think people love to see a story that hasn't been a linear route to success and that has had many hiccups along the way. Because when you have really bad times and you win a race afterwards, that makes it all the more exciting for every single person around you. So I am delighted to be able to come on and share those experiences with you. Hopefully, some people have taken some learnings from it. And I continue to learn from people like yourselves, have great intuitive conversations. And I heard one great one at the conference that we were at Antropy that I've taken with me. You're never too old to learn or too young to lead.
Love
And on
that.
that note, I will finish. Thank you very much, Gary.
Alex, thank you, man.